Hi everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we are sewing a super cute and versatile shirred dress. This dress features a fully sheared top with elastic channels to create a beautiful texture effect. The pattern includes both mini and maxi length options with clear lines marked on the skirt pieces so you can easily choose your preferred version. Just be sure to check that the length works for your height and style. Just for reference, I'm petite and I shortened the maxi version by 4 inches to better suit my proportions. This is a beginner friendly project, so even if you are new to sewing garments, don't worry. I will walk you through each step with clear instructions and helpful tips. But before we start, let's go over the materials you'll need to bring this pattern to life. First, your main fabric. The best choices for this project are lightweight, breathable fabrics with a soft drape that can gather and shear beautifully without becoming bulky. When selecting your fabric, keep in mind that the sheared effect shows up best on plain or solid color fabrics. Next, your sewing thread. Choose a color that matches or contrasts your fabric color depending on the design detail you want to enhance. You'll also need your elastic band, preferably no wider than quarter of an inch. This will be used to create the sheared effect across the bodice and contour areas. Make sure it has a good stretch and recovery for the best results. In the handbook, you'll find suggested measurements for each section, but it's very important to test the elastic directly on your body, as the final fit may vary depending on your proportions and how stretchy your elastic band is. Next, you will need commercial bias tape to encase your elastic. It should be slightly wider than your elastic band so you have enough room to stitch along both edges without catching the elastic. You can make your own bias tape at home using the same or a contrasting fabric for a custom finish, and I will link a video tutorial in the top corner in case you want to check it out. Now, you might find retail garments where the elastic is stitched directly onto the fabric using a zigzag stitch. This method uses fewer materials and takes less time. But in this tutorial, I will show you how to encase the elastic instead, because even though it takes a little bit more effort and materials, it will give a cleaner and more beautiful finish to your garment. Next, your regular sewing tools. You will need a basic machine, a serger, which is optional but helpful for knitting seams, and a good iron. Pressing as you go will make a big difference in achieving a clean and professional finish. And finally, your sewing pattern. You'll find it linked below in the description box. The pattern comes in US sizes from extra small to extra large and is provided in layered PDF format, so you can choose to print all the sizes at once or just your specific size. Now that you have all the materials ready, it's time to prep your fabric and pattern pieces before cutting. Start by giving your fabric a good press with the steam to pre-shrink it. Lay your pattern pieces on the wrong side of the fabric, aligning the grain line, which is marked on each piece with a double-headed arrow, parallel to the selvage. To ensure accuracy, measure from each end of the grain line to the fabric edge, and both distance should match. Secure your pattern with pins or weights and then cut along the outer edge since seam allowance are already included. Finally, don't forget to transfer all the notches and marking points to your fabric because they'll guide you through the construction later on. With everything prepped, let's move on the step-by-step sewing process and start bringing your dress to life. Let's start by joining the back skirt pieces together. To do so, place both back skirt pieces with right sides together, aligning the center back edges. Sew along the center back using half an inch of seam allowance. Serge the raw edges close and press the seam allowance first flat and then towards one side. To continue with right sides facing, align the front skirt piece with the back skirt piece at the side seams. Sew along each side using half an inch of seam allowance. Then serge the raw edges close to knitting and press the seam allowance first flat and then towards the back. Now we're gonna leave our skirt on the side for a moment and we're gonna start assembling the top. To do so, place the front and back top pieces with right sides facing, align and sew along one side seam only using half an inch of seam allowance. Serge the seams close to knitting and press the seam allowance as always, first flat and then towards the back. With the top open flat on the wrong side of the fabric, place the bias tape continuously along the top from one edge to other, following the guidelines marking on the pattern. This will create the channel for the elastic band later on. For easier placement, or if you are a beginner, I strongly recommend to transfer the channel lines from the pattern to the fabric in advance, of course, before placing the bias tape. Once you are happy with the placement, edge stitch along both edges of the bias tape, making sure the right side of it is facing you. Secure it in place, ensuring the ends remain open for elastic insertion later on. Continue this process until you have attached all the required bias tape channels. When placing the tape near the upper part of the top where the armhole begins, leave some extra length extending beyond the edge. This will allow you to trim the tape later following the curve of the armhole cleanly and precise. In the handbook, you'll find suggested measurements for the elastic bands. However, I strongly recommend testing these measurements directly on your body before cutting, as the final fit can vary depending on the stretch and recovery of your specific elastic. Using a safety pin or a bobby pin, insert the elastic bands into the bias tape channels and repeat the same procedure until you insert the elastic in all the channels. Pin both ends of both elastics to keep them in place. Gently stretch and adjust the elastic to create even shearing along the top edge. Do not sew the ends just yet. Just secure them temporarily with pins while adjusting. When inserting the elastic, start from the front piece and guide it towards the back. This ensures the side seam stays pressed towards the back and prevents the elastic from getting caught inside the seam. Before continuing, it's a good idea to try the piece on for any necessary adjustments. Since the elastic bands are not yet permanently secure, be careful because wearing the piece at this stage might feel a little bit uncomfortable, and there is a small risk the elastic could shift or slip inside the channel. So make sure you secure it as good and as much as you can. To make the fitting process easier, you can base the shoulders and side seams. This way, any modifications can be made before securing the elastics and sewing the seams permanently. The next step will be securing the elastic bands. To keep them in place, stitch each end securely about 3/8 of an inch, maximum half an inch, in from the edges. This helps reduce bulk at the side seams. Once stitched, pull the elastic gently to trim any excess, minimizing the amount of elastic cut in the seams when the other side seam is sewn later or when the bias tape is placed to clean armholes and necklines. Now we're going to take our top and we're going to run two parallel rows of long gathering stitches along each shoulder seam, using the longest stitch length available on your machine. Sew the first row 1/8 from the edge and the second row 1/4 inch away from the first row. Gently pull the bobbin threads to gather the fabric until each shoulder measures approximately 2 inches, maximum 2.5, depending on your desired look and fit. To keep the gathers in place temporarily, insert a pin at each edge and wrap the gathering threads around the pin in a figure 8 shape. This helps hold the tension without knotting the threads. Then, with right sides facing, align the front and back top pieces at the gathered shoulders. Sew each shoulder seam using half an inch of seam allowance. Serge the seam close to knitting and then press the seams, as always, first flat and then towards the back. To continue with right side facing, sew the side seam that we left open before, using half an inch of seam allowance. Serge the seam close to knitting the edge and press the seam first flat and then towards the back. Now it's time to join the top and the skirt at the waistline. To do so, mark the center points of both the front and back top and skirt pieces. With right sides facing, align the center of the top with the center of the skirt and match the side seams. Since the top is already gathered with elastic, you'll need to gently stretch it to match the width of the skirt. Once aligned, sew the top and skirt together using 5/8 of an inch of seam allowance. Serge the seam close to knitting and press the seam first flat and then towards the skirt. Next, let's create the waistline final channel to insert the elastic. To do so, I stitch along the seam where the top and skirt were joined, sewing the seam allowance down towards the skirt to form a channel for the waist elastic. Leave a small opening unstitched to insert the elastic band later on. Using a safety pin or a bobby pin, guide the elastic through the entire channel until it comes out to the other end. Overlap and secure the ends of the elastic with a few stitches, and then close the opening. After that, we're going to start bias binding the neckline and armholes. So let's begin with the neckline first. With the right side of the fabric facing you, place the bias tape right side down onto the neckline edge. Start near one of the shoulder seams, leaving about half an inch of extra bias tape extending past the shoulder seam. Open the fold of the tape and align its raw edge with the neckline's raw edge. Leave a gap of 1 to 2 inches unstitched at the start and then begin sewing using the pre-creased fold line as a guide, typically 1/4 of an inch of seam allowance, and continue sewing around the neckline. It is recommended to gently stretch the tape as you sew to help it mold smoothly around the curve without puckering. Just stop 1 to 2 inches before reaching the other shoulder seam. At this point, measure how much bias tape is needed to reach the end and add half an inch for seam allowance. Cut the excess and open the ends of the bias tape and with right sides together, sew the tape ends together to form a continuous loop. Trim the excess and press the seam open. Then align this seam with the shoulder seam and continue sewing the remaining section of the neckline. Once the entire neckline is stitched, fold the tape over the seam allowance and understitch the inner fold of the tape close to the seam. Then fold the bias tape all the way to the wrong side of the fabric, enclosing the raw edges completely. Press it flat, ensuring the tape lies evenly, and edge stitch along the inner folded edge of the bias tape. Repeat exactly the same procedure on the armholes as well. Once the neckline and armholes are finished, press them over a curved surface such as tailored ham or a rolled towel to help set the shape smoothly and maintain the natural curve of the garment. To complete the garment, we're going to finish the skirt with a baby hem. To create this delicate hem, start by folding the raw edge of the skirt hem up by 1/4 inch of seam allowance towards the wrong side. Then sew close to the folded edge. Trim the excess fabric close to the stitching and then fold up once more by 1/4 of an inch, enclosing the raw edges, and then sew close to the inner folded edge to secure the hem. As a final step, press the hem line carefully to set the stitches and give it a crisp finish. Then give the entire garment a gentle overall press, focusing on smoothing out the seams. When pressing the gathered area, use steam and a light touch. Just hover the iron slightly above the fabric or gently press using a pressing cloth to avoid flattering the texture while still setting the shape. And that's it. Your shirred dress is all done. I really hope you enjoy sewing with me. I had so much fun making this piece and I hope you feel proud of what you have created too. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I always love hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe for more sewing projects and tips. And if you make the dress, please tag me on Instagram or use this hashtag. I would love to see your version. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy sewing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!